Death penalty debate. As a Boston jury considers the fate of a convicted bomber, we explore church teaching on capital punishment.
I feel forgiveness in my heart.
As we forgive, the mother of the man killed by a South Carolina police officer sets a Christian example. Solemn pilgrimage. Pope Francis meets with Armenian Catholic bishops ahead of a mass marking the Armenian genocide. And the living word. During this Easter week, a medieval Catholic play is resurrected in the nation's capital. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Easter Thursday, April 9th, 2015. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. A federal jury now considers the fate of the young man convicted in the fatal Boston Marathon bombing. Will the 21-year-old face death or life without parole? Wyatt Goolsby is here now with the latest.
Brian, the Boston bombing trial's next phase, the sentencing, could begin as early as Monday, but the date has not officially been set yet. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was found guilty on all 30 counts, and more than half of those are capital charges, which means he is eligible for the death penalty. Jurors in a Boston federal court will once again have to delve into the events of April 15, 2013. 3 people died and hundreds of runners were injured that day at the Boston Marathon after twin bombs exploded. Prosecutors will push for the death penalty. The defense will ask for life in prison, citing Tsarnaev's youth and mental health as factors. The guilty verdict was a relief for survivors.
We're obviously grateful for the outcome today. It's not a happy occasion, but it's something that we can put one more step behind us. It's been difficult, but we've gotten through it with each other.
The verdict is stirring up national debate about the death penalty. The governor of Massachusetts says it's justified.
I would support the death penalty. I continue to, but obviously this is a decision that gets made by the jury.
Just days after the 2013 attack, Cardinal Sean O'Malley said there are other ways to punish Tsarnaev without executing him.
I oppose the death penalty, which I think is one further manifestation of the culture of death in our midst, and we must build a culture of life that respects life.
According to a Boston-based poll, more than 60% of people living in the city itself support life in prison. Outside of Boston, those stats tend to even out.
You tend to see more Democrats than Republicans opposed to the death penalty. You tend to see more minority residents than white residents opposed to the death penalty. Those general trends held here, which is, I think, part of why you see opposition to the death penalty in this case so much higher than it is nationwide and even further away.
The state of Massachusetts abolished the death penalty back in the 1980s, but this is a federal case, and the jurors have all stated they would be open to handing down that sentence if the case warrants it. Pope Francis has spoken out strongly against the death penalty on different occasions. Brian.
Thank you, Wyatt. Father Thomas Petri is Vice President and Academic Dean at the Dominican House of Studies here in Washington. Father Petri, would the Church support the death penalty given the facts of this case?
Well, I don't think the Church would ever support the death penalty in the contemporary situation. It's a different question whether Catholics can support the death penalty.
Good point.
We heard Cardinal O'Malley say that he's against it. Pope Francis has been against the death penalty, as was Pope Benedict XVI and St. John Paul II before him. But the Church has a long tradition of permitting states at least sometimes recourse to the death penalty.
So Catholics are not obliged to go one way or the other on this.
I think that's right, and I think the Church has been very clear on that over the last several years, that Catholics can prudentially disagree with each other, and in this case, sometimes even with the hierarchy of the Church on their opinion about particular cases and what might or might not be the legitimate punishment.
Is there clearly a case where the death penalty would be justified?
Well, I don't know if there's clearly a case, because this is also a prudential matter. Traditionally, the Church's longstanding teaching has been that the perpetrator's guilt would have to be absolutely certain and known, that there would have to be a proportionate crime committed. And then there are other circumstances you'd want to consider, like, can the people be protected? Is it medicinal? Is rehabilitation possible? But primary among those in the Church's uninterrupted tradition has been, what is the proper proportionate response?
There are those who would argue, what is the benefit in keeping this young man alive? And isn't there a danger that he could try to radicalize others while in prison?
Well, I think Cardinal O'Malley said it well that the purpose of perhaps of keeping him alive is to not further violence and not to further death. And whether he radicalizes others, I think in our modern context in the developed world is probably not really of consideration because he can be incarcerated for life.
So if jurors in a case like this have to be open to the idea of the death penalty and they don't believe in it, do Catholics find themselves going against their conscience?
Well, they might find themselves going against their conscience, in which case they need to make that known to the judge, but they're not necessarily going against the faith if they're in favor of the death penalty or if they find that a perpetrator or a criminal deserves the death penalty in a particular situation.
That's an important clarification. Father Thomas Petri, the Dominican House of Studies. Just one final thought on, as Catholics in this situation, what's the best thing we can do?
Well, I mean, to be honest, personally, I probably would ask to be recused from such a situation. You know, the Church's teaching is that if you are going to inflict the penalty of death or whatever punishment you inflict, it can never be out of a place of anger or vengeance. It always has to be out of a place for the common good and for the restoration of order in society.
And certainly we can pray for this young man and for the jurors who have to make this decision.
Absolutely.
Father Petri, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. The mother of a man shot to death by a South Carolina police officer speaks out tonight.
I feel forgiveness in my heart, even for the guy that shot and killed my son.
Judy Scott's 50-year-old son, Walter, is the man seen fleeing in this cell phone video. He's running from North Charleston, South Carolina police officer Michael Slager, who fires 8 times with his service revolver. The 33-year-old Slager now faces murder charges after the release of the video, which has sparked outrage.
The policeman is supposed to protect the people, not try to frame them or get out of what they've done wrong. They're supposed to be honest people, protecting us.
Slager's initial account that he fired in self-defense when Scott grabbed his taser is now being disputed. President Obama calls for an end to psychiatric therapy that attempts to change sexual orientation or gender identity. This in response to the December death of 17-year-old Leila Alcorn. The transgender teen committed suicide, mentioning this conversion therapy in writings that were left behind. The Catholic Church teaches homosexual persons, like any of the rest of us, are called to chastity and deserve to be treated with the utmost dignity. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops offers this teaching on same-sex attraction. The Church seeks to enable every person to live out the universal call to holiness. Persons with a homosexual inclination ought to receive every aid and encouragement to embrace this call personally and fully. This will unavoidably involve much struggle and self-mastery, for following Jesus always means following the way of the cross. The sacraments of the Eucharist and of penance are essential sources of consolation and aid on this path. Meanwhile, the administration takes another step in its LGBT agenda, opening a gender-neutral bathroom in the White House complex. It's located in the Eisenhower building next to the West Wing. The White House calls it a symbolic step to protect the rights of lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and transgender persons in the workplace. An executive order barring discrimination based on sexual orientation in the federal government took effect yesterday. Cuba could soon be removed from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. President Obama may announce a decision at this week's Summit of the Americas in Panama.
There's a process involved in reviewing whether or not a country should be on the state sponsor of terrorism list. That review has been completed at the State Department. It is now forwarded to the White House. Our interagency team will go through the entire thing and then present it to me with a recommendation. That hasn't happened yet.
Supporters of the Cuban government clash with opponents outside the summit, also attended by Cuban President Raul Castro. With Iran, Sudan, and Syria, Cuba is one of just 4 countries on the U.S. list accused of supporting terrorism. This, of course, has been a major sticking point in the move to normalize Cuban relations with the United States. Following the massacre of students in Kenya, a senior police official tells Kenyans to stick together no matter their religion.
Never accept to be divided along ethnic and religious lines, like what happened in Garissa attack. If something happens like that, fight back. ensure that you deal with the situation and deal with those people, because even if you are divided, you'll never be left safe. They'll just kill you.
Survivors say the al-Shabaab terrorists targeted Christian students after separating them from Muslims. Grieving relatives are now burying their loved ones. 3 people are shot dead today inside a courthouse in Milan, Italy. Very rare for that country. A man opened fire, killing his lawyer, a co-defendant, and a judge. Prosecutors say the suspect was attending a bankruptcy hearing. He fired 13 shots, moving throughout the courthouse before fleeing on a motorcycle. He was caught a short time later with a loaded pistol and 2 spare cartridges. A prosecutor says the gunman may have used a fake ID to get his weapon past security. Employees and others with proper ID don't have to go through metal detectors. Pope Francis welcomes bishops of the Armenian Catholic Church to the Vatican. He will join those bishops for Sunday Mass, marking the 100th anniversary of the Armenian genocide.
Vi ringrazio per questo incontro.
The Pope thanking the bishops for the opportunity to meet with them. Francis invoked the divine mercy in healing the wounds of that genocide. The Armenian National Institute says about 1.5 million Americans died between 1915 and 1923. At Sunday's Mass, St. Gregory Narek, a 10th century mystic and poet dear to Armenians, will be proclaimed a doctor of the Church. Pope Francis meets today with the President of the Slovak Republic. This meeting comes ahead of the 25th anniversary of the mending of diplomatic relations between Slovakia and the Holy See. Nearly 2/3 of Slovakians are Catholic. The Pope and the President discuss challenges facing the Middle East and the protection of human dignity. Coming up, a Catholic commentator calls out Rolling Stone magazine for shoddy journalism long before its most recent scandal. And Catholic university students transform a biblical medieval play for the modern age. We have a Thursday thought for you from EWTN foundress Mother Angelica. She says it's your obligation to speak the truth, and everyone can either take it or leave it. But truth must be in us. We live in such poverty of the truth today. Spoken so truthfully by Mother. Thanks for joining us on this Easter Thursday, April 9th. I'm Brian Patrick. Rolling Stone magazine's sensationalized campus gang rape story sparked a media outcry, resulting in a retraction. But the Catholic League's Bill Donohue says it's not the first time the same reporter grossly misrepresented facts. I spoke with Donohue today about Sabrina Rubin Erdely's allegations in a 2011 report on the Archdiocese of Philadelphia.
The number of factual errors and omissions, serious omissions that took everything out of context, the timeline which was misrepresented, as well as pure ignorance about the teachings of the Catholic Church, was astonishing. So it doesn't surprise me that she also committed these kinds of bogus stories again. My only regret is that Rolling Stone should have done something the first time about her. But since they're not going to do anything about it, since they got her red-handed with Virginia, I guess you can do whatever you want there. This is tenure for life.
So they're going to keep her on staff, they said, because this is really kind of an isolated incident. Sounds like you don't agree with that.
Well, it's not isolated. I was very specific. I didn't write an op-ed. I didn't write an essay. I was very specific in terms of names and dates. When you make charges against priests and you talk about the majority of them were actually exonerated, and you take, for example, statements made by a guy who admits that he was high on heroin when he made his accusations, and you never tell the reader, and you imply that the Pope knows about everything going all over the world, from Boston to Bombay, about priest and sexual misconduct. I mean, there are so many things. I could go on for a long, long time, and I have detailed it in my work on Rolling Stone and this woman.
All right, Lauren Ashburn, media and politics contributor for The Hill, is with us to talk more about this. Do you think this reporter should be fired?
No, absolutely I don't. Now, I have not looked at what Bill has said. That's new information to me.
Why?
However, I believe that this journalism, as you know, is a team effort. It is not all about the individual. This show isn't on the air because you are sitting in this anchor chair. The show is on the air because you have a whole support team making it so. And it's the same thing, you know this, at Rolling Stone. You have an executive editor, you have an editor, you have someone who manages her day to day. And it is the fault not of one single person. Therefore, calling for someone's head is something that I think in this instance, calling for her head is not something we should be doing.
Somebody above her should have caught this. Do you think Rolling Stone even cares about journalistic integrity? I don't think so.
Well, it's not so much journalistic integrity. I can't speak to that, but I don't think they care that there's a brouhaha.
They get a lot of publicity.
This. Well, they get publicity, but they also don't seem, in the initial apology, it wasn't very clear that they were really apologetic, and the reporter didn't quite apologize to the fraternity that was maligned.
Didn't they actually commission that study by the
did.
Columbia School of Journalism?
Yes, and I attended that. Steve Call is the person who actually authored the report. Good for them. Good for them that they were able to say to someone outside, take a look at this. They retracted the story. It came down. I think all of that was very well done. And they called it a failure of journalism. And it was. It was a big, big one.
I want to switch gears real quickly. You wrote recently about another media silence on a different topic.
Abortion.
Yeah.
How many abortion, pro-life, anti-abortion voices are there in the media right now, speaking out loudly and clearly? My understanding from being an avid media watcher is not many. Why is that?
Why is it?
Why I wanted to get into this. And really it's twofold. Number one, the media is done with abortion. They're on to LGBT issues, and people think that abortion, we lost that. You know, we're not going to talk about abortion because nobody can run on it. Politicians can't run on it. They realize that they are failing when it comes to that and not getting reelected. And women and men, do not want to speak out because they think it's going to hurt them in business. I was at a roundtable, conservative women's roundtable, and I polled a whole bunch of women who said, I wouldn't say anything in a business setting because many of the women around the table could have had an abortion.
There's a lot of bullying. There's a lot of, pushing on this, and very interesting that you wrote about it. Lauren Ashburn, we thank you for being with us. We hope you come back.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Well, it's a Catholic play that hundreds of years in the making, and tonight, Jason Calvi joins Catholic University of America students who are transforming a medieval tradition.
And then the body moves. Catholic youth students are transforming a well-known story. Boom. They're depicting the creation of the world. This is Adam, and here's Eve. Enter the angel Gabriel.
Hail, gracious Mary, God's chosen one.
Bringing news of the incarnation, hence the title, the Annunciation.
Just a brief reminder of, the whole Easter, the whole Christmas story is not just a day or a week, it's all year, and that's something important that we all need to remember.
These Catholic University students are rehearsing a play that's very modern, but it's actually an adaptation of one that's 800 years old.
Instead of the medieval dialogue, movement takes center stage. Thanks to a special grant, award-winning director Pata Sikushvili is producing the play. Catherine Ritter transformed the original work called The Wakefield Cycle. It's a series of plays from 14th century England celebrated during the Feast of Corpus Christi.
In the late 1400s, early 1500s, it's when we know that the whole town got involved. It was kind of Mardi Gras for medieval Yorkshiremen.
And unlike in the Bible, Joseph speaks in this play.
I'll talk to her. Theater was something that the church celebrated and used to communicate with an audience, to tell its stories and teach its audience. It's a great way to evangelize, a great way to spread the good news.
Queen Elizabeth banned Catholic plays in 1570, but they come back to life next week at Catholic University of America.
Let's go even here.
In Washington, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Jason, thank you. Golf's greatest players tee off at the Masters in Augusta, Georgia. Legends Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, and Gary Player attended the traditional opening. The spotlight is on Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods. McIlroy, just 25 years old, is positioned to win his fourth major. On the other hand, Woods hopes to play 72 holes in a regular PGA Tour event for only the second time this year. Up next, a pivotal point in our nation's history. America's Civil War finally came to an end 150 years ago today. And Orthodox Christians prepare to celebrate Easter this Sunday with colorful traditions. 10 years ago today, following the funeral of Pope John Paul II, cardinals began an intense period of silence and prayer before their conclave to elect a new pope. Thanks for joining us on this Thursday evening. I'm Brian Patrick, and also 150 years ago today, on Palm Sunday, April 9th, 1865, years of bloody civil war finally ended at a Virginia farmhouse. Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered his army to Union Commander Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox, Virginia. Park Ranger Lee White says the America we know today was defined by that war between the states.
Outside the revolution, this is what makes America what it is today. You make it into the government that we know it today, the federal government.
White says lessons learned from the Civil War are still relevant in present-day America. New data shows efforts by the Department of Veterans Affairs to improve medical services falling far short of the goal. Catherine Zeltner reports.
Rosie Noel had already waited 8 months for a biopsy.
Harley, are you going to let me sit this here?
So when she learned yet another appointment had been canceled, the retired Marine gunnery sergeant went ballistic.
I think my words were more in the lines of that I suffered a traumatic brain injury, I have PTSD, and you need to have security meet me at the quarterdeck.
The Department of Veterans Affairs set a goal for itself. No veteran would wait more than 30 days to see a caregiver. But despite a building campaign and staff increases, the number of vets waiting longer than that has barely budged. Data shows between August and the end of February, nearly 900,000 appointments took longer than 30 days. The VA Medical Center in Fayetteville, North Carolina is near the top of that list.
I'm a veteran, and I know what it means to be a veteran, and I also know the debt that this nation owes to its veterans.
While the national caseload has been growing at about 2% a year, for the Fayetteville VA,
it's 8% growth a year. In fact, it's a little over 8%. About every 10 to 12 weeks, we need to add a new primary care team at one of our sites.
To address the situation, Goolsby has added trailers and buildings to the main campus. A nearby outpatient center will nearly double her current capacity. Retired Army Sergeant First Class William White says he's never had trouble getting seen by the Fayetteville staff.
You can't get no better service than the VA.
That hasn't been Noel's experience. In 2005, she refused to leave Iraq after a rocket fragment tore open her face and broke her jaw, earning her a Purple Heart. But when a routine screening found abnormal cells, she expected a bit more urgency from the VA.
This isn't a infected ingrown toenail.
After 10 months, Noel finally got her biopsy, but only after going outside the VA system. The results came back benign, but
what if it was already stage 4 cancer? I served my country, I'm combat wounded, and to be treated like I'm nothing is unconscionable.
Goolsby promises that things will improve, but for now, vets like Noel will have to wait and see. Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine, and thanks to all of our veterans who have served. Colorfully painted eggs are on sale in Romania ahead of Orthodox Easter celebrations. Egg decorating is a Romanian tradition dating back hundreds of years. These eggs are dyed during the week leading up to Easter, which they celebrate this coming Sunday. Eggshells are emptied and dried before intricate painting, which can take days, begins. Romanians knock the eggs against each other starting at midnight on Easter Sunday. They say, "Christ is risen," and reply, "He is risen indeed." Indeed, he is. Until tomorrow, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. You can watch again on YouTube. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick as we leave you tonight with some moments from this week's general audience with Pope Francis. Good night and God bless you.